Hello and welcome back to another guide for MEIOU and Taxes. We are focusing on economy today. I picked out Portugal because it's a beginner-friendly state and of course it's destined to go into colonization. Last time I showed a lot of stuff in Naples, but Naples is rather rich and of course it's somewhat landlocked, not landlocked, but locked into conflicts here with the surrounding states, either Balkans, North Africa or Italy. And therefore maybe not the best fit for an economy tall play, or if you want to just learn how economy works. At a later point in this video, or maybe in the next guide, I will show a little bit differences to hordes and maybe pick up Bohemia campaign of mine again to just show how an advanced country in a later stage can look like. But now let's start on Portugal. So you start with a balance of 1.1. I intentionally left the time running for about 5 years to just stabilize the game a bit, because in the early years is a lot of calculations being done. For example, you only start with 2 merchants, but at 1360, when the first recalculation of the merchants happens, you get 2 additional ones because you get upgraded to a major center of trade from important to major, and therefore you get more merchants. However, that's not what I want to phrase here. It's just, okay, we now have a solid starting position. From these values, not much should change. If you now want to have more money, what could you do? First of all, as Portugal, I would recommend, for example, you can delete unnecessary forts to get a little bit more cash. And of course, mothball, for example, the fleets you don't use, but I, for example, would use the transport ships and stuff like that to conquer into North Africa. I even sold some of my galleys because I don't need galleys as Portugal. I want to have trade ships as much as possible later on. Now, but back to the provinces. The first one, what I want to show you is you want to keep your estates loyal. What we are going to do now is to just give them stuff they like. For example, we are going to promote and support commerce here. We are going to promote the aristocratic faction. We are going to yield concession to ancient liberties. We are going to support the clergy a bit with a perform a show of devotion here. And we are also going to support the burgher autonomy, because the burghers is something we want to grow due to the fact that we are a colonial empire in the future and we need strong burghers to support us there. And in regards to the nobility, maybe we also want to... we are going to overlook tenants here. Therefore putting our loyalties a little bit higher, and now we are just going to observe what it does to our income within the year. So I'm going to make a small cut and just skip ahead 1 year. Here we are again, almost 1 year later. As we can see now, the balance went up to almost 2 ducats positive. So after deleting the forts, we basically got around 0.6, 0.5 additional income now. And that's just due to the fact that our estates like us more now, and therefore are willing to pay more taxes or are less corrupt, and therefore corrupt less of the incomes of the provinces. This effect, what we just saw, of course scales with our autonomy. Now, making them more loyal also increases our effect, or like the autonomy of the provinces, and therefore leading to a decay in autonomy. For example, this one is now decaying a little bit here, and that's also mostly due to the fact that our estates like us more. Therefore, this has a secondary effect which is going to happen over the years, that our autonomy is of course decreasing, and therefore our income is slowly increasing even further. However, of course, the loyalty, especially of the nobility, can change quite a lot due to the fact what you do to them. You, for example, want to revoke monopolies or stuff like that. The next one we want to check, in fact, directly related to that, is our tax income in detail. If you hover over delegate tax code, you can see what kind of taxes we are in fact exerting from our country. And if we check the tax code in detail, if we click here, no, not the one, configure taxes here, in fact, we can see, for example, that the land tax brought in almost 80 ducats from our peasants, which are working on state property. And you can go through most of the taxes, but most of them are going to be disabled at start because we of course would need to do more reforms for our state. Another one which is working is the rent due, which brought in 18 ducats. Noble dues brought a little bit in. But for example, the charter fee didn't really bring us any income. It cost us a bit. Yeah, that's the situation in our state. And land tax is in fact something we can use. And land tax, if we want to check it in detail, land tax is, where is it? This one. It's currently, for example, in our capital province, we have a medium land tax. These kind of taxes are assigned automatically, therefore don't mind. The cost is based on land size and resource limit. Is increased. A cost is increased by tax efficiency and local autonomy. Therefore, it depends on how much is in this province, how much administration it costs us, and it gets more expensive the more autonomous the province is. Therefore, for example, in this province up here, which has an autonomy of 96, it is probably almost double or 3 times as expensive to extract the same amount of taxes from this province than from our capital, for example. And that's one of the big problems why autonomy is playing such a big role in efficient money making. Now the other thing how you could address the income of the land tax is of course that you could just own more land or property as a state. Therefore you get more shares of the profits it's making. For example, if we check out this province here, we can see that the farmland is making a huge profit. And if we now go to our estates, we can check out the resource share pie chart here, and we can see that the lower class is in fact having 46 of all resources. The nobility only has 29% and the clergy has only 14%. If we check, for example, in detail the nobility, we can see that the nobility has 32% of the farmland, 12 of mines, 10% of forestry. And if we, for example, check the clergy, it only has 16% of the farmland. Therefore, combined, that would be 48%. And if you check our state, we roughly own 5% of the farmland. And if you add everything together, you can think about, yes, it's roughly, the lower class roughly has half of the resources in our country in their own pockets. What we could do here in this case, I wouldn't recommend it with every country, but in Portugal might be a good path to increase your state income is to expropriate some farmland from the peasants and put it under state control. Therefore we are going, just for the sake of the example here, to take 50% of the farmland of the peasants and put it under state control. There's 173 units of it. We're going to take it, we're going to take a stability hit for it, and then we are going to observe what happens due to that. So therefore see you in a sec. Another year has passed and now we are in 1363. And as you can see, our income now jumped already up to 3.5 ducats just by taking some property from the peasants. Now the state is no longer at 5% farmland, instead it's by 22% of farmland. However, doing that of course has a certain price. All the profits we are making now are no longer going into the pockets of the peasants. For example, let's take this province here. The peasants here are going to be a little bit poorer than they were before. Of course, if you think about it, maybe that's fine for you for the moment, just due to the fact that you can invest that cash into provinces again, therefore making them more profitable in the long run. You could do investments which are in your interest and not what the peasant thinks is good for him. Because if they have a higher income, they are probably more likely to just buy more food or more consumables or like luxury products just to have a better life, which of course can also stimulate your economy because they produce a demand for luxury products and stuff like that. However, maybe at the start of the game you rather want to open up industries which are not yet running. For example, let's take this province here. It has, for example, no fishery industry or not a forestry industry. And there's a lot of open room, therefore you maybe just want to invest into it before you make your peasants richer or let them be richer. Of course, also you always have to consider that the peasants are of course also giving a fraction of their income to the nobility anyway, therefore you are making them a bit poorer, but you're also making your nobility a little bit poorer in that regard. So it may be in your interest to take a little bit of stuff from your peasants if they have that much share as this country starts with. And of course you maybe want long term, especially as Portugal, you want to build up your burghers, have a medium strength nobility, and probably get rid of the clergy as good as you can. Now, next is, now we checked out, okay, loyalty is producing more income in your estates. State property is important for your income. Of course, this is also going to change your taxation because you own more stuff directly, you have more upkeep costs and stuff like that, but in general it's most of the time an increase in income, of course for a price of life quality of your population, let's say. They might grow slower due to that. But now to the investment part. We want to identify industries which are profitable and which might be worth to investigate or invest into, because most of your income will happen due to the fact that you tax profitable incomes. Let's take the province up here, which has a 94% autonomy. It's still producing 0.75 taxes, which is more than, for example, let's take this one, which is almost directly to the capital and only at 57% autonomy. And we want to understand why it's making that much money. And you can hover over provincial administration to see a more detailed rundown on the incomes. On page 2, for example, you see a revenue of 28 per year. It has, of course, some costs for like corruption is going into the estates. You have some costs for the guys who are making your taxes, like the collectors itself. And then you have a drill down of incomes from your peasantry, nobles and stuff like that. And of course your property income. And as you can see here, our property income is the leading benefactor of our income. Afterwards, it's the peasantry income which are paying a land tax. This one. So it's basically how much land you have there. They have to pay a certain degree in taxes. And like, it's not a rent, it's more like a due that you produce something. And the next one, of course, nobles are also paying a little bit, but the obligation of fees are rather small. They also pay a small land tax, which is of course the same. They are using land of the state to do stuff. But the biggest impact is of course a property income, because that's basically your profitability of the industries that you own here. Now let's start here on this screen first. As you can see, we have only profitable industries. And now we want to see like how is the distribution of that industries here. And we can see that the state, for example, owns 25% of the resources, which is consisting of 22% of the farmland, 24% of the forestries, and 50% of the mines. And when the music is still bugging out sometimes. And as we can see here now, the profitability or the profit income of the farmland is plus 12, and the other ones are plus 2 and plus 2.5. Therefore, most of our income is coming from the farmland, which we own to a certain degree. And of course, that's consisting of the industries which are on that farmland. Most of it is a crop industry here, which is extremely profitable. It outputs value of 98 plus 1 for food and fiber, so therefore almost 100 ducats per year. Has a labor cost, of course, which is paid to the peasants, but that's only 46, therefore the profit is almost 46 ducats after all. That's of course quite heavy. If you calculate, it doesn't add up exactly, but let's ignore that for a second, because it's not 100% exact here due to the fact that some calculations are done in different phases of the year, but it's roughly accurate. The profitability is high on that farmland, and therefore we are making, of course, a share of that profit in our property. And this is paid out to us as income for taxation from here. And that's, of course, one of our best ways to get more cash, because our taxation laws, which are basically from the bureaucracy, are still pretty poor or not advanced, because we are pretty feudal, a very feudal state. Therefore we are getting paid in the products we produce basically, and we cannot yet tax properly stuff like indirect taxes, which is, where do we have it? It's not even in here, but let's check it out here. We don't have, for example, a salt excise, which is literally a tax on salt or exotics here. Substance. No, that's substance, sorry. No, it's exotic, sorry. Like, we don't have a tax on exotic production. We need to reform our state to get higher or advanced taxation laws enabled and make our taxation more efficient, because the state of the country right now only allows for certain like rents or taxes on the production, and that's like pretty poor, because it's basically you have a farm and someone comes to you and tells you, give me 10% of your wheat that you make this year. And that's your kind of way how you collect taxes currently. It's not yet pay me 10%, 40% of the value that you maybe make. So you have to get there first. And for that we have to, of course, transform our state. And some of the very big impacts here are state reach, or this tax farming reform, which is increasing the tax efficiency massively. And all of these tax laws are going to increase your income significantly if you can make them. And of course we cannot yet do any upgrades here. We could do an upgrade here, state tax farming, but we need 15 state reach for that, so we have to improve from 6% to 15%. And then we would basically double our tax efficiency to make taxes and even make them cheaper, and we would also allow, for example, the salt excise, therefore a tax on salt production, on salt selling. And of course we also can more efficiently tax our nobility and stuff like that. Therefore these reforms are very important for profitable states. And when you get that, you can also have less state property. At the beginning, your best income is in fact state property, but you can only have it to a certain degree, because when you check the tax code here again, we have a property maintenance of 11 diplomatic points already. Therefore, it's costing us already a lot to keep 70% of our state under direct control. And that's of course only going to increase the more property we handle directly. And the more autonomous the realm is, the more expensive it will get. Therefore, we cannot get to like 100% property ownership here, because that would be impossible to pay in diplomatic points. You can of course increase your taxation here and increase how much diplomatic points you want to invest. However, as Portugal, of course, you want to get to colonialism as fast as possible. Therefore, you need diplomatic tech, you need administrative tech, you need everything. You shouldn't invest too much into spending in taxes if you can have a decent income. Yeah, that's for the profitable industries for the moment. And the last one, I just want to show it quickly. We checked this province already in detail. Now that we have identified a province which has profitable industries, we could invest into it. The crop industry is hugely profitable, so if we were to invest, for example, let's say a small amount here, like 10 and then another 10, we are going to expand the farmlands industry next calculation, so next year, which will of course decrease our profits because we have opened up more farms, but we don't have enough workforce yet. Therefore, in decreasing our efficiency for a short while until the workforce has arrived, like by growing or immigrating in. And then we have even higher profits than we currently have. Therefore, investing into this province here is a very good idea. What you want to find, however, are provinces which have a small industry which is hugely profitable. I think one was here. No, it wasn't this one. You're searching for industries which are relatively small but very profitable as your first investments. This form most likely are, for example, salt industries, because salt is hugely profitable at the beginning. This one here. You make plus 33 ducats from a mining and only 80 size mining. It's a rock salt industry. As you can see here, it only requires 4.3 labor. It produces 64 value of salt and only takes 21 value in costs, therefore making a huge profit. And investing into it can be massively profitable. There's still room to expand it, therefore I would do it. You can almost double it, and you don't need that much population to double it. Only 38,000 people in here. Therefore, investing into this province here is probably a very good idea. And even further, you can open up a fishery industry here and a forestry industry, which are producing food for the fish, and of forestry could produce raw materials and stuff like that. If we check out another province like this one, fishing industry is in general decent. You can see it here. It's not making super much money, but it's profitable most of the time because it's producing food, and food is in general always useful. Especially if you want to grow a city. For example, this one already has amenity 4, therefore it has room for 200,000 people. It only has 40,000 currently. Therefore we could safely invest 50 ducats here to grow the city fast. We don't need to pay here or upgrade the amenities soon. We just want to grow the residents here because we have a lot of room to expand into. Yeah, that's it. Also, when checking out this city, if you have a larger city in your state, whatever you play, and you don't have an higher learning industry opened up here, then always open one up. You need 10,000 residents at least to open it up. Therefore, this city already has 40,000. It's definitely time to open one up. They are always profitable. Higher education, always a really good investment. And that's it for the second. As last part, I switched countries and switched to a horde. I loaded up a save game that I had. And what I want to show you here is that hordes are working completely differently. So if we, for example, select a horde province like this one here, we can see that we have, as a population, we barely have any peasants, but we have 70,000 nomads. And nomads work as special industry, which is called nomadism. And nomadism basically produces a lot of everything. It's food, salt, fiber, fuel, raw, exotic and military. They produce everything. And they are decently profitable most of the time, as long as you are on grassland and stuff like that, where you can graze animals and stuff like that, what nomads do normally. It produces a certain problem. You could open up a crop industry here, which we already have here, but to work a crop industry you need peasants. And you could also open up a salt industry here, but you also need peasants for that, but you only have 10,000. And as long as the nomad industry is profitable, it's unlikely that they are going to migrate or like switch from nomads to peasants. What you need to do here is, in fact, you need to reduce the clan power here to get people moving from nomads to peasants. And you can only do that by your interactions here. You can weaken them, but especially as a horde power, you don't want that, because your hordes are also your manpower and everything. You get massive amounts of manpower from your hordes and force limit. So weakening them you only want to do if you really want to settle down for something. Of course you can still build up cities. Like for example, we have Chinquitura here. Chinquitura has 7,000 residents, some peasants, a little bit of nomads. It's a mixture here. It's also on the Nordic front at the river. And as you can see, it has a lot of industries comparable to what you saw in Portugal, just with the exception that the biggest industry is not crop, it's nomadism here. And therefore producing a lot of different things. And everything is more or less profitable here, so all is fine. But this is of course still a problem that you at a later stage want to get residents which can come from nomads, but it's still a problem to grow that city here. Yeah. And therefore, if you play a horde, you want to do two things. You want to build up state reach, which we currently have 0 of, because state reach, centralization here, and tribe power are in fact influencing how well you can settle down your nomads and transform them into peasants over time. This is going to be a very slow process. So even though you have provinces here like Bouquet, which have 2,328 farmland, and they also have a coal deposit here, yes, and they even have some forestry here. The problem is you have 0 peasants here, and all the nomads that are currently emigrating from here are not going into peasantry, they are moving to a different nomad province, therefore not helping your problem. So what you need to do here is you need to open up a crop industry, but then you have like 500 peasants. This is not going to work quickly. Transforming the tribes into a peasant population and growing up a massive agriculture industry here is going to take a lot of time. Even further, even though you have a lot of farmland here, you are not very well suited, for example, barley, wheat or millet here, which you currently have available. These provinces are basically waiting for the arrival of potatoes from the New World. So most of them are going to be great at a later point. However, what you could grow here is, let's pick this province. What you could grow here is, for example, you could open up a standard pasture industry here, which is similar to nomadism, just in a settled way. But you could also open up fibers here, plant fibers, for example, to produce not food, but materials for your urban industries. And that's something you could do very early on, until you have potatoes at some point which are more suited for this kind of climate that you have here. In general, if you play a horde, you want to work with cities to a certain degree. You want to build up trade cities, trade hubs, to work on the Silk Road, which is basically this path here. There are multiple ones. The most common one are where the camel symbols here are. It's basically here and then into China. You could follow that path by placing merchants here, 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 and then into China here. But of course you need a province in the white node here, which is Yetisha, to be able to trade with Xiba. But that's possible to do as a horde if you want to. Then you should build up certain cities to produce to produce some commerce income, additional income for your state, and slowly but very slowly start settling down your horde. If you play Muscovy, for example, you conquer the territory here, you are of course bringing with you a high centralization, laws from your state which are against basically this nomadism. Therefore, you can force them to settle down. You will have high decrease. What did we see here? Like, you have this high emigration from these provinces to something like cities and everything, because you are basically discouraging them to stay nomads. But still, it's a very slow process. And you even have provinces here which also have like 1450, Donetsk here, 800 farmland plus mining and stuff like that. It's huge. This territory has a massive potential, but it's basically unlocked and it's basically locked at start. You can't unlock it quickly. While, for example, if you look back at Portugal, if you have 200 or 300 open farmland and you already have 50, 60, 80,000 peasants there, it's easy to max this province out and therefore have a higher income. It's basically impossible to do here as a horde. You are going to have heavy costs settling down the nomad population, switching them into peasantry, switching them into a regular industry, building that up, being unprofitable for a long time. Therefore, don't be blended by these huge amounts of agricultural potential here. It's costly to unlock. But if you can make it, the last 2 or 3 centuries of the game are going to be extremely rich. And that's it for the economy guide for the moment. We looked at some special industries, or like at industries in detail. And feel free to ask questions or ask for more details if you need some. Therefore, see you next time.